Hello and assalamu alaikum everyone. Welcome back to another episode of Mind and Deen podcast with your hosts Hannah and Aisha. So we know it takes two to tango, but it takes three to come up with an amazing episode. And today joining us, we have a very special guest. He hosts his very own podcast show, the Growth Mindset Podcast, and is on his personal mission to empower people.
So welcome to our show, Irshad. And yeah, would you like to introduce yourself to our listeners?
Sure, thank you, Hannah and Aisha. Yes, I am Silawath Irshad. And a quick introduction, as Hannah briefly mentioned, right? I host a podcast channel called as a Growth Mindset, where I typically interview people. The whole intent of my podcast is basically to interact with people, leaders from various industries, fields, understand what they were able to do, why they became successful, and what could we learn, implement that in our life so that we could also become successful. And other than that, I think I've been hosting my podcast for over 5 years. I'm based out of India, Bangalore. Alhamdulillah, a Muslim, which I think it's the greatest blessing in itself. And I think just a person who's trying to be better every single day, and at the same time trying to spread that message as well. So that's a quick introduction about me.
So yeah, today we're back with episode 8, and we will discuss how best to optimize life as a Muslim youth.
So, Irshad, how do you think we can optimize our day-to-day routine as a young Muslim in this day and age?
Okay, so this is like pretty much a loaded question. I would say the reason being this routine part around how can we optimize our lives. I think once we get that in place, everything else is sorted. But before we get even into the routine, first, I think it all starts with identifying your own self. Now, when I say identifying your own self, I mean it's all, everyone now, if you go online, everyone is a guru or a mentor in themselves. Everyone is giving you things to do so that you could become more efficient, productive, successful, things of that sort. However, I think the most important part, and this is something that I've realized by interacting with people across the world, that everything eventually starts from yourself, right? Because when you truly know who you are, what you stand for, what do you want in life, I think that is when you will then be able to create a routine that makes sense to you. For example, the routine that I have is totally different from, let's say, Hannah, yours, or Aisha, yours, right? Because our goals might be different. Even though I'm based out of India, I pretty much work more like a US kind of a time zone, or you could say UK. Why? Because I'm pretty much awake the entire night and I'm sleeping after Fajr, like it's around 5:30, 6 a.m. and I wake up at around 1 p.m. IST. The reason, because I've identified that is what works for me. That is when I'm the most productive. That is when I'm more efficient. That's where I can actually sit and focus. And I think before we actually go ahead and dive into our routine part, I think what we need to do is actually ask ourselves questions around what do we really want to do with our lives, right? And there's a very powerful question in the Quran, right? So um, I think it's in Surah Takwir, if I'm not wrong, where Allah, after giving his proofs about him being the Lord and his creation, he asks a question saying, "So where are you going?" And that is a very powerful question. I mean, as a human, I think there are two states that we can always be in. Either you are conscious, you are aware, or you are in the state of heedlessness, where you're not aware of what's happening around you, and you're just living life on a whim, right? But it is very important for us to actually become conscious. It comes with practice. It's not something that you can become right off the bat, become conscious, but it's something more like practice. You have to, as soon as you wake up, there are some specific routines that you can follow. But I would recommend, before you get into the routine, you try to sit, pen down, identify what your strengths are, what is that you want to do with your life, try to become aware, try to become conscious at every single moment. What do you want in life? Like, write down your goals. What do you actually want to achieve in your life? Once you have that things written, that's when you can actually now go ahead and start working on routine. When I say routine, your routines then is actually your foundation for you to achieve to where you want to go, right? Like going back to Quran's that rhetoric question around where are you going? The same thing you need to apply in your life to kind of identify where do you want to go in your life. Once when we know where we want to go into our lives, that's when we can actually create a routine. That's when we can decide our path. Saying, okay, if we are driving down, let's say, to a specific city, we first need to know that that's our destination. Because once when we know that's our destination is when we can then decide the route, what car are we going to take, or are we going to take a train, a metro, depends. But first, destination is important. As soon as we wake up, right, the first 2 hours are very critical for us. And there are a lot of scientific evidence behind it, a lot of research behind this stating that when we wake up, our brains are at their highest frequencies, like alphas and beta, which means at that point in time, you're more receptive to learning. And when you learn, that will actually stick. So what I typically do, and I've identified this is the best for me, that works out. People can try this as well. As soon as you wake up, I first ensure that like I'll have 2 glasses of water. The reason I do that is to ensure my intestines and my body's waking up first. When that happens, I'll go wash my face, and then I'll sit and meditate. When I say meditate, it's more like breathing exercises. I do 4 by 8 exercises, what they call it, where you inhale from your nose, deep inhales for 4 seconds, and exhale out for 8 seconds. And I do 10 repetitions of this. And then there is another breathing exercise where you breathe in like as much as you can, and then you slowly take another second of breath inside. And I think there is a neuroscientist. He's a very famous neuroscientist. I forgot his name now. He's writing a book called as Protocols that's going to come in. Pretty famous out in the US. So he says when you do that, what happens is your brain is able to take in more oxygen and then release all that carbon dioxide that is stored in your lungs and in your brains, which means it will make you more proactive. As soon as I do that, I'll go do my wudu. I'll go ahead and do my prayers. I'll do some dhikr. I'll read Quran. I make this a point that as soon as I wake up, my day is starting with my prayer. Like that's non-negotiable, because I think one of the most important things is you're born on this planet, on this world, for one and one purpose only first, and that is to worship your Lord. We'll get into worship side as well. I mean, there's a lot of story. I was not like this, at least not practicing the way I used to before. There was a time when I was more like an atheist, but there was a journey that I had to take. But going back to the routine, right? Do my prayers, and then I'll read a book probably for 10-15 minutes minimum every single day, non-negotiable. So the first 1.5 hour to 2 hours, I'm ensuring I'm doing all of these things. And at the same time, I ensure that I'm not touching my phone for the first 1 hour at least. Because the moment you touch your phone, that's when you are giving yourself out to the world, and now world has access to you. So before I think you give access to yourself, to your time, to the world, I think it's important that you first 1 hour or 2 hours, you hold it to yourself. Do the 2 things that are actually very important. Work both on yourself and your deen. I think that's the first routine I would tell people to initially start off with.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, interesting. So a couple of things I picked up from what you said was to start with the internal work. So figure out what works best for you. And then go from there in terms of planning out your day. And it's interesting because in the work that we do, we follow CBT principles, so cognitive behavioral therapy. And then when we work with people with like low mood or anxiety, and we have to like start scheduling their day, because a lot of people with low mood, they kind of draw back and withdraw. And the first step to scheduling activities is to figure out what is of value to you. So figuring out your values, your interests, noting that down, and then kind of turning those values and interests into activities. Yeah, I like how you said that was the first, because that is obviously the core. You need to figure out what works best for you and what your core values are, your core interests are, regardless of what people say around you, because a lot of people can get influenced by external sources, so they may not know what they stand for, essentially. So figuring that out is a great first step, and then going from there. So you spend like 2 hours in the morning not looking at social media, which is a great trip, and it is very difficult to do because I have tried doing that myself, and I feel like a lot of the time I just fall back. So the first thing I do sometimes is just check my phone and get back to messages and then go to my routine. But it's very important to like hold back, keep that space for yourself, just sort yourself out. And yeah, I think that's a great tip for everyone listening.
Yeah, sounds like you have a really good routine, Irshad, and like you said, that's something you've kind of built up over time and you figured out that it works best for you. So I guess it's about, yeah, like you said, consciously setting those goals, and then having that intention, that pure intention to kind of follow through with them. I feel like once you make that intention, then it's a bit easier to kind of find yourself.
So I want to ask a question right here. I think it's interesting because this is a challenge that Anna, which you just mentioned, a lot of youngsters face this, right? It's good that you want to prevent yourself from looking at your phone, but end of the day, we still fall, and that's fine. But I'm curious to know, why do you think you fall back to your phone? I'll tell you why I asked you that question, but first I'm curious to kind of understand. As soon as you wake up, okay, you're checking your phone, why that's the case? Any specific reason?
I
Uh,
think mine's out of habit.
mhm.
Been doing it for so long. Check my phone before I sleep, and then when I wake up, it's just out of habit. Even when there's nothing to see or check, it's just like going on those usual apps, refreshing the screen. Um, yeah, I don't think I have an actual solid answer for that. Well, not a very valid one.
Yeah, I think also it's that instant dopamine rush because
Yeah.
what you do when you go on your phone, you either go on Instagram, WhatsApp, catch up with people, and
Yeah.
it instantly gives you that dopamine rush. And I think that is more interesting than delayed dopamine rush, if that makes any sense.
Yeah,
So I
yeah, yeah.
think that's the reason.
That
That
makes
makes
sense.
sense. You're
Yeah.
definitely right. I mean, one of the reasons is obviously getting those dopamine hits as soon as you wake up. I think one of the other reasons is also fear of missing out as soon as you wake up, saying, okay, what if I miss something important that I shouldn't have,
Yeah.
right? That's another thing that I've noticed. I think one of the best ways people can actually make this a habit is I do this. I don't keep my phone right next to me. I don't. I keep my phone away in another room or probably in a hall, or even if it's in even if it's in my room, I'll ensure it's in silent mode and I have notifications turned off for all of the apps.
Mm.
Which means if I see notifications, then I know someone has messaged me, and now I have to click on, and that's a very sneaky way of these big companies trying to pull us into their applications, and that's where we have to understand, okay, why are we going? And that's why I asked you that question. Is it because you saw something on your phone and it was a notification? Because if there is a notification and you know that was your trigger to get into that respective habit, we need to get rid of that trigger. So the trigger there could be those notifications, that maybe having that phone right in front of you and you saw, oh, it's a phone, so let me pick it up and have a look. So I think for all of us who want to become good at this habit, I think first we'll have to identify what is our trigger event that is pushing us towards our phone. I think once we find out our trigger event, then we'll be in a better position to put our phones aside, or better take control of those first 1 or 2 hours that we start our day with.
Yeah, and it's definitely a habit that you build up slowly.
Mm.
So I don't think it's a good idea to completely stop initially because it takes time to build up. And if you like go from 0 to 100, then it's very easy to fall back, which a lot of us do. So it's
Yeah.
also important to build that step slowly, and see. But yeah, the fear of missing out is a fear I think that we all have, and it's getting worse with like increased social media use and all of that. So
Yeah, but like you said, unhelpful behaviors definitely take time to change. And that's something we do kind of tell our clients as well, just to kind of reinforce you're not going to see these changes straight away. But yeah, it requires a lot of motivation, I think.